For those of you who are keeping up with current DC Comics, you probably know about the Absolute Universe or the All In event that occurred recently. But for those who aren't keeping up, basically what happened was there was a big event where, spoiler alert, Darkseid died, and his death resulted in the birth of a new universe called the Absolute Universe. And basically what we have now is kind of what we've seen in the past with like Marvel's Ultimate Universe, where it's just going to be fresh, unique takes on these characters. Um, there's not necessarily any direct ties to the main universe or anything like that. They're just fresh stories. And today I'm going to be talking about why the Absolute Universe is absolutely fantastic. So please stay tuned. So first, starting off with what I think is the bread and butter of this universe, Absolute Batman by Scott Snyder. Yes, you heard right, Scott Snyder. If you read the New 52 Batman, that was him. This series is absolutely fantastic. I think it is a lot of what's been missing from the Batman mythos, at least recently. Um, no offense to the current and previous runs, I've enjoyed those to a certain extent, but I feel like so far this series has been absolutely hitting every single issue. I haven't had like a single issue where I've been like, man, this kind of felt like a filler or a waste of my time. The series has been fantastic. So basically, the question is asked here: what if Batman was not a rich millionaire playboy philanthropist, but rather he was poor? What if Batman's mom wasn't dead? What if Batman wasn't raised by Alfred Pennyworth? And you might hear these questions, you might ask yourself, okay, but like you just described everything that is Batman. Like why do I care about this? Like what's the point in a Batman whose parents didn't die? First of all, I didn't say his parents didn't die. I said his mom's alive. All right, little little teaser for you there. And second of all, I think it's interesting to see a Batman who has to be resourceful, who has to be tactful, who can't just say I'm Batman every 5 seconds and suddenly have the solution to the problem. And I feel like that's been a really honestly concerningly large issue with ongoing Batman series, at least recently, is that Batman just is Batman and therefore he's got the solution. This one, I mean, you're seeing Batman kind of in his earlier years. Um, you can kind of think of it as like similar to the energy of Batman Year One, where you're starting to see him pick up. He's not the perfect Batman yet; he's still learning, and you really get to experience that learning curve through this character. And honestly, I feel like that is what it's missing, really, because when it comes to mainline continuity comics, people are they refuse to move on. They refuse to accept character developments and move on to new characters. Um, in my humble opinion, mainline continuity, Batman's been Batman. Like I'm kind of getting tired of it. I love the character as a whole, but to see every time a new author picks up like a character, whether it be Nightwing, The Flash, Batman, and then just to see their character regress instantly, see them go back through things they've already learned, um, it's a little bit exhausting. But when you give a character a fresh start, not only a fresh start, but a fresh start by someone who did some of the best recent Batman comics, in my opinion, you get something fantastic. This series, I think, only has 8 issues currently out. Yeah, 8 issues. And I gotta say, I love all the twists that they've played on this character. Um, you'll find that when it comes to your typical villains stuff like that, you don't know what to expect. That's another thing too. With a lot of these comics, with a lot of these really popular characters, whether it be Marvel or DC, everything is so unbelievably predictable. It's so formulaic. But when you take your prior expectations and you throw them out the window, there's nothing you can expect, right? You just gotta kind of absorb and sit there, um, and really try to take in what's happening because you don't really know what to expect because you know nothing about this universe, right? It's completely new to you. And I think that's some of the benefits of starting off a separate universe like this, and it's also a great jumping on point for anyone who, um, you know, is a little kind of overwhelmed by all the continuity with Batman. I mean, oddly enough, I'd also recommend the New 52 as a jumping on point. Scott Snyder knows what he's doing, okay? So I would highly recommend you guys check out this series if you aren't already. It might be a little hard if you care about getting first printings. It's gonna be hard to come by. This is the first printing here. I think it's selling for like somewhere between 35 to 50 US dollars in this condition, which is just insane to me. Like, guys, come on, it's a hobby. Do we have to do that? Um, But seriously, guys, if you can afford to, pick up this series. If you're not able to pick it up in singles, pick it up in collected editions. I'm sure they're going to do something like that. I would not be surprised if there was some kind of like absolute omnibus or something. I mean, not anytime soon, but down the line for sure. The next series I want to talk about is Absolute Superman. This series, I think, has some of the best underlying kind of meaning and structure behind it. I feel like I worded that very poorly, but basically, this series asks you the question of what if Superman came to Earth not as a baby, but as a someone who'd already grown up on Krypton. Um, and it also, I think, really hits hard and tries to emphasize the already pre-existing I guess themes existent in Superman stories. So like obviously Brainiac, for example, is like a really smart artificial intelligence. You know, and we're talking about like the destruction of Krypton because of its resources, right? And I think especially now with the crazy boom in AI, at least recently when it comes to like generative models and stuff like that, um, I think this series is such an important read because it kind of talks about the dangers of overuse of that kind of technology, and being overtly reliant on it. And I think Jason Aaron really kind of like sews that in there so beautifully. Because, for example, on Krypton, before it was destroyed, they show that some of the stuff that resulted in their destruction was they were using a lot of really high power tech. Some of it of which was generative technology. Teachers were telling them to basically prompt engineer their homework, and they were basically generating their homework instead of writing it. And then, of course, when Kal-El wrote his own homework because it's something that he felt like he wanted to do, it's just something that he feels should be done, which I think is so great because it shows in this guy was really always meant to be a reporter. But Kal-El gets in trouble for writing his own homework. Which obviously I feel like that you're getting to a point where this is probably a dramatization of what you would expect the future to be, like a more dystopian future. It's like, oh, you need to generate everything. But the point is here that everyone else on Krypton was so overtly reliant on generative technology, to the point where A, they were using it for everything, and B, it destroyed their planet because of overuse of resources that were being mined, right? So, if you ask me, I think this perfectly parallels some of the at least Jason Aaron's thoughts on on the current state of the world, and I think it also really kind of highlights what was already pre-existing in Superman stories, but has kind of not been as emphasized lately in more modern takes. So I would say, without a doubt, check this series out. It is probably top three of the Absolute Universe, maybe top two. Yeah, no, honestly, Batman, Superman. I'd have to think a little bit longer about the rest of them, but this series is such a ride. If you're not reading this, you are missing out because the underlying story that Jason Aaron is trying to tell through Superman, I think it's innovative, and I think it really does highlight some of the issues of things that are happening currently in our world. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know, but I think it's almost so obvious that it's impossible to miss that what this, at least the first couple arcs, really touch on are the dangers of using something like generative models or generative AI to substitute for creativity. Um, highly recommend. Highly recommend. The next one's a bit more fresh. It didn't start at the very beginning. So Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman all started as soon as like basically they were the first three absolute comics to start, whereas Flash, Green Lantern, and Martian Manhunter had started a little bit later. But this one is a bit of a newer take. It's Wally West Flash. He's a bit younger. Um, and the way he gets his powers is also quite different. And I'm still kind of trying to pick up on what's going on here. This is by Lemire. So if you're familiar with some of his work, if I recall correctly, he did like I think it was the New 52 Animal Man, which I mean like he's got kind of like a more darker, gritty kind of vibe to it, which I don't normally enjoy when it comes to the Flash. But truth be told, compared to the current ongoing Flash, I'm enjoying this quite a lot. There's not a lot really to say. It's only on issue 3, which does mean it's really easy to hop into right now. But what I will say is this: keep in mind this is the Absolute Universe. It's not the main universe. So characters who are important in the main universe are not going to be important in the Absolute Universe necessarily. So don't get bummed if certain characters aren't as important or don't get as much, I don't know, screen time. But Absolute Flash, fantastic so far. I'm interested to see the direction it goes, but there's still kind of a lot up in the air about like what direction it's taking. So there's not a lot to say at this point. Absolute Wonder Woman is honestly, I was incredibly surprised by how good this was. As someone who grew up like reading like Percy Jackson, I've always enjoyed like Greek, Roman mythology stuff. Even if I can't say I'm really well versed in it, like I'm obviously not like an intellectual when it comes to this stuff. But to kind of see that more delved into with Absolute Wonder Woman, I think is really interesting. I think it's something that has made this incredibly enjoyable to kind of just see like the different way that they use magic, and also you can tell the way they do storytelling too. Kelly Thompson, you can tell, I think, has read up on the way that Greek and Roman myth is typically told. At least in terms of like like the standard stories, like the format, the way it's done, the way that the gods respect each other, the way that they kind of play their games. You see that here. So to kind of see that and also get to see some really cool, a unique take without a doubt on Wonder Woman, I think is fantastic. So a little bit of a premise here. Absolute Wonder Woman. Basically, what happens here? She doesn't get raised in Themyscira. She gets raised in Hell. She's placed there thanks to Zeus, who basically fears the Themysciran or the Amazonians' powers, and she's the last Amazon. But she's never allowed to know that she's an Amazonian, so she kind of has to find out, or she kind of does find out naturally. It's kind of hard to explain, but she just kind of knew all along that's what she was. And I think that's really like core to her character. Not being, there's no way you can really take away her heritage from her, which I think has a really powerful underlying like kind of theme behind it. And also just her abilities and like her character in design in general in this series is fantastic. I love it so much. Honestly, if you guys can spare the cash, I'd say follow all of these. But it, I understand comics aren't cheap. But for reference, this is a very popular series. This is the third printing of the first issue, so this thing has been selling out. I got in a little late. This was one I kind of jumped on a little late, because I didn't really think too much of it until I read a preview, and then I was like, wait, this actually seems kind of interesting. It is. It is. I've got all the comics that are currently out right now, all the way up to number 7. So, highly recommend you reading this. Really interesting stuff. Next, we have the Absolute Martian Manhunter. This one's currently on issue 2 or 3. I thought I had a third issue, but I might be tricking myself right now. Anyways, this series it's really interesting. It's kind of like a psychedelic experience. It was kind of confusing at first, but you kind of start to pick up on like what exactly they're laying down partway through the second issue, I would say. The first issue, you kind of just got to sit there with an open mind and try to just absorb what you're seeing here. The Martian Manhunter, the way that it's created in the Absolute Universe is, I think, so like different from the main one, but it's still got, I think, like the key concepts at least ingrained. You can see the inspiration from the main universe, Martian Manhunter, but this is still very unique. The art style also, like, what a trip. Like, you can stare at these comic panels for like forever. It's honestly crazy. Like, I look at these and I think to myself, how does anyone plan this out? Like, how does anyone like structure this? Like, this is like the art style is almost so chaotic but beautiful at the same time. Chaotic and structured, really. And you got to wonder to yourself, you're like, how does anyone like plan this? How do they come up with this? This is fantastic. So for anyone who likes Martian Manhunter, me personally, my only real experience with him is through the animated series, and through like Justice League stuff like that. But anyone who likes him, check this out. Highly recommend. Last but certainly not least, Green Lantern, Absolute Green Lantern. We've only got 2 issues out currently, but I will say it's something. It's very interesting to me because it is. You can tell without a doubt that Al Ewing, I think that's how it's pronounced, is taking a step away from what you would expect out of a standard Green Lantern story, which I would say is pretty consistent across the Absolute Universe. But also like still keeping some of the relevant main universe characters relevant, just not in the way that you would expect. And I don't want to say too much because then I'm spoiling it, and you guys probably won't want to read it if I spoil it. I know I sound like I'm just hyping up these comics without giving any backing, but if I give backing, I give context. If I give context, you know the story, and it's like, come on, guys, don't you want to read this yourself? I honestly recommend you do. This one is fantastic, as is the entire Absolute Universe. Really, what I think, this one almost reminds me more like psychological horror type stuff. Um, but I don't know. But we're still so early in the series, similar to like the Flash, where I can't say for certain what kind of vibe they're dropping. But without a doubt, still catching my interest, keeping me interested, and I'm excited to see where this series goes. All in all, guys, the Absolute Universe is amazing. I think it's a perfect example of what happens when you take a step back from being at the kind of like shackled by continuity, by like existing like crossover events, by like, like for example, like Nightwing and Titans, right? You got to be concerned about what's happening in Titans if you're writing Nightwing, which normally wouldn't be an issue if you were writing both, like Tom Taylor was, but that's not a thing anymore. Anyways, all this rambling to say that because of the fact that these writers aren't shackled by continuity, at least not yet, they're able to create these really unique takes on these characters that I think is like a breath of fresh air. It's much needed. In my opinion, I think in comics as a whole, we're so bogged down through continuity currently that it's kind of becoming a limiting factor. It's and the craziest part to me too is it's like it doesn't seem like many people can really make up their minds because we need to stick to continuity, but we're perfectly fine with backtracking on character development. Um, so perfect example of that right now I think is the current Batman run. I'm so confused about what Jeff Loeb's doing. No hate. Like I see, I see maybe what he's trying, what kind of vibe he's trying to bring, but I honestly feel like this would read better if I just finished reading Hush and assumed nothing has happened since then and then just jumped right into that comic. But I haven't. I've been reading continuity since New 52 and I'm kind of confused. So, in this case it almost feels like they've abandoned a large chunk of continuity, but then at the same time, like I said in all these other series, they're still shackled by it. It's a ramble. It's a circular ramble. It'll never end. Um, Point being, let writers write because this is what happens when you do, and I love it. I love it. I can't wait to see more. I highly recommend you guys check it out. Thank you for watching this video. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.